The conference room at Apex Technologies was sleek and modern, filled with polished glass tables and high-backed chairs. It had always been the kind of place where big decisions were made, where the future of the company was shaped by powerful people in designer suits. But for me, on that night, it became the stage for the most humiliating moment of my life. My name is Jack Peterson, and until about 90 seconds ago, I thought I had it all figured out. I had a career I'd worked tirelessly for, a wife I thought I knew, and a life I was proud of. That all changed in an instant. "You should probably go home, Jack," Victor Allen, my boss for the last 5 years, said with a smug grin. I had always known him to be charming but calculating, a man who thrived on power and control. "I'll take good care of your wife tonight," he added, his tone dripping with mockery. I stood there, frozen, in the center of the room, surrounded by the entire leadership team of Apex. There were 15 people, all in sharp suits, holding wine glasses and watching with a mix of amusement and barely concealed smirks. And there was Sarah, my wife of 8 years, sitting on Victor's lap like it was the most natural thing in the world. Her hand rested on his shoulder, and she didn't seem to mind the attention from everyone. In fact, she looked entirely at ease, as if this wasn't the betrayal of the century. My mind was spinning. My hands trembled as I looked down at the crumpled dollar bill in my hand, the one with the word rental scrawled on it in bright red ink. The dollar bill felt almost trivial in comparison to the lace panties I was holding in the other hand, Sarah's. I had bought them for her last Valentine's Day. She had worn them that morning when we had gotten ready for the party. The familiar scent of her perfume lingered on them. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. It was as if the world had stopped, and all I could feel was a growing sense of disbelief, as though I was living in someone else's nightmare. How had everything gone so wrong? My voice was distant, unrecognizable as I stood there trying to process what was happening. "Are you okay, Jack?" Laura Jennings, the chief marketing officer, stepped toward me. Her expression was one of concern, but it wasn't real. I could tell. She didn't care. No one in that room did. They were all just enjoying the show. "I'm fine," I heard myself say, my voice sounding hollow. It didn't feel like me speaking. "I just need to make a call." And with that, I walked out of the room. Every eye in the room followed me, but I didn't care. I felt numb, a shell of the person I used to be. The elevator doors closed, and as the elevator descended to the ground floor, I struggled to catch my breath. I needed to leave, to escape this moment, to get some clarity. The heat of the summer air hit me as soon as I stepped outside. It slapped me awake, reminding me that this was real. This was happening. The hum of the city outside felt almost surreal as I stepped onto the sidewalk, my shoes clicking sharply against the pavement. The world around me was moving at a normal pace, people hurrying to and from work, cars honking, the usual chaos of a Chicago summer evening. But I was in a daze, my mind replaying the image of Sarah on Victor's lap over and over. The disbelief was starting to wear off, and what remained was pure, cold anger. I was burning inside, but I didn't know where to direct it. My hands still shook, not from sadness, but from a deep, simmering fury that was building with every step I took. I pulled out my phone and dialed the only person I knew who could help. John Matthews had been my lawyer and friend for years. We'd been through a lot together: college, bad breakups, and the occasional legal mess. But this was beyond anything I could have prepared for. "Jack, what's going on? You sound off." John answered on the second ring. His voice was calm, soothing, but I knew he could hear the crack in my tone. "Divorce papers, John?" I said, my voice flat, almost robotic. "And I need you to dig into Victor Allen's finances. Something's off at Apex, and I think he's embezzling. I'll prove it." I didn't know how I had kept my voice steady, but somehow I had. My heart was pounding, and my mind was racing, but I couldn't let it show. John was quiet for a moment, processing what I'd said. "Okay, calm down. What happened?" "Victor's sleeping with Sarah," I spat out, the words burning like acid. "He humiliated me in front of everyone, threw her underwear at me, and gave me $1 for the privilege. But that's not the worst part. He messed with the wrong guy. I've been gathering evidence on him for the last 6 months. I'm going to destroy him." The silence on the other end of the line felt heavy. I could practically hear John weighing his words. Finally, he spoke, his voice turning professional. Let's meet in an hour. I'll have the divorce papers ready and we'll start digging into Victor's empire. I ended the call and stood there for a moment, staring at the screen. My reflection in a storefront window was almost unrecognizable. The Tom Ford suit I had bought for these kinds of events, the Rolex Sarah had insisted I get for our anniversary, the Italian shoes that cost more than my first car, they all felt like cruel jokes now. They were symbols of a life that was slipping through my fingers. My phone buzzed again. Sarah, I stared at the text. Where are you? This is embarrassing. Come back upstairs. I deleted it without responding. Then came another message from Victor. No hard feelings, Jack. Just a little bonding with your wife. She's a good sport. I couldn't help it. I smiled. But it was dark, twisted. He thought he had broken me. He thought I would shrink away in shame. What he didn't know was that I had been planning this. I had been waiting for this moment. I had collected the pieces of his empire, and now I had everything I needed to bring it crashing down. I dialed Ethan's number next. My brother, who had always been my rock. He answered quickly. Hey man, what's going on? I need a place to crash tonight. Maybe for a few days, I said, my voice calm now. Can you help? Of course, Ethan replied, his tone laced with concern. What happened? I'll tell you when I get there, I said, cutting him off. I needed to get out of the city, out of this nightmare. I needed space, time to think, and most importantly, I needed to get to work. By the time I got to Ethan's house, I could feel the weight of the past few hours pressing down on me. The drive had been a blur, the city lights flashing by, but my mind was a million miles away. When I pulled up to his house in Oak Park, a modest 2-story place with a neatly trimmed lawn, I couldn't help but appreciate the simplicity of it. No high-rise office buildings, no glittering suits or fake smiles, just the quiet comfort of family. Ethan was already waiting outside, his usual laid-back demeanor hidden behind a look of concern. You look like hell, he said, handing me a beer as I stepped out of the car. Feel worse, I muttered, taking the bottle and following him inside. The familiar scent of his house, coffee and old books, was strangely comforting, and for a moment, I almost felt like things were normal again. Almost. We sat down on the couch, the tension between us palpable. I knew he was waiting for me to say something, to explain, but I didn't know where to start. How do you explain the kind of betrayal I had just endured? How do you tell your brother that the woman you'd loved for the better part of a decade had just humiliated you in front of an entire room full of people? I'm getting a divorce, I finally said, the words feeling hollow as they left my mouth. I hadn't said them out loud yet, and hearing them made everything feel too real. Victor's sleeping with Sarah. He's been embezzling from the company. I've been gathering evidence on him for months. Ethan didn't say anything right away. He just nodded slowly, like he was processing the weight of what I just dropped on him. Then, after a long pause, he spoke. I told you, man, he said, his voice rough but not unkind. You can't trust people like that. You put all your faith in the wrong person. I know, I said, running a hand through my hair, frustrated. I thought I had it all figured out. I thought everything was perfect. And now, I don't even know who I am anymore. Ethan let out a small sigh. You're Jack Peterson. You're the guy who worked his ass off to get where he is. You're the guy who never let anyone push him around. And you're the guy who's going to take down Victor Allen. I didn't say anything at first. He was right, in a way. I had always prided myself on my work ethic, on building my career from the ground up. I had been so focused on success, on the money, the recognition, the accolades, that I had ignored all the red flags. Sarah's ambitions had always seemed to align with mine, but in reality, we were playing a different game entirely. And Victor? He was a snake, slithering through the cracks I had overlooked. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was what I was going to do next. I've already set things in motion, I said, my voice steadier now. I'm going to expose Victor, I'm going to take him down, and I'm going to make sure Sarah understands exactly what she's lost. Ethan didn't flinch. Good, but don't forget, you're not just fighting Victor. You're fighting the whole damn company now. You sure you're ready for that? I looked him in the eye. I don't have a choice. They crossed the line, and I'm going to make them regret it. The next few hours passed in a blur. I laid out the details for Ethan, told him everything I had discovered about Victor's fraudulent activities at Apex, the shell companies, the overinflated acquisitions. I could feel the fire inside me growing stronger with each word. What they had done, what Sarah had done, wasn't just personal. It was criminal, and it was time for me to take control. By the end of the night, I knew what I had to do. Tomorrow, I would meet with John to finalize the divorce and get the ball rolling on taking Victor down. The first step was already behind me. The next steps? They would be the ones that changed everything. The next morning, I woke up to the harsh sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. I had barely slept, tossing and turning through the night, but when I checked the time, I realized I was already late. It didn't matter, though. Nothing about today felt like it mattered anymore. The weight of everything, the betrayal, the loss, the pain, had settled into my bones like a second skin. I had no more room for shock or grief. It was time to move forward, to take back what had been stolen from me, no matter the cost. I grabbed my phone, and the first thing I saw was a text from Sarah. "Where are you? Why are you doing this? I love you, Jack." I stared at it for a moment before deleting it without responding. It wasn't just the words she had written, it was the tone, the desperation, the way she thought that saying "I love you" would undo everything that had happened. The truth was, I didn't believe her anymore. I didn't trust anything she said, anything she did. The woman who had stood by my side for 8 years, the woman I had built my life with, was gone. The woman who had betrayed me so completely could never be the same person again. I didn't reply. There was no point. The second text was from Victor. "No hard feelings, Jack. I know this is tough, but we'll get through it. Just come back upstairs and talk to Sarah." I almost laughed out loud at the audacity of it. He truly believed I was going to walk back into that conference room, swallow my pride, and pretend like nothing had happened. He thought that because I had built my career in a world of corporate compromise, that I would let him off the hook. But he was wrong. He didn't know me like he thought he did. He didn't know what I was capable of now. I didn't reply to him either. Instead, I got up, dressed in a simple button-up shirt and slacks, nothing flashy, nothing that screamed success. I wasn't interested in looking the part anymore. I just needed to get through the day, meet with John, and begin the process of dismantling everything they had built on lies and deceit. By the time I arrived at John's office, I was more focused than I had been in days. The anger was no longer an all-consuming fire. It had become something colder, sharper, like a blade ready to strike. John's office was in the same building as his law firm, a nondescript building downtown. Nothing fancy, nothing that would draw attention. He greeted me with a handshake and a sympathetic nod, but I could tell he could see the determination in my eyes. "Everything's ready," John said as he handed me the divorce papers. "I'll file them today, and we'll start the process. But we need to talk about Victor." "You're sure about this?" "More than sure," I replied, my voice steady. "I've been collecting evidence on him for months. The embezzlement, the shell companies, everything. It's all there. We just need to bring it to the right people." John studied me for a moment, his brow furrowed. "You know this is going to get ugly, right? Going after someone like Victor, especially with the connections he has, it's not going to be easy. You're going to have a target on your back." "I don't care," I said, my voice firm. "I've already lost everything. What else do I have to lose?" John let out a slow breath. "All right, we'll move forward with this. But I need you to stay level-headed. If we're going to take him down, we need to be strategic. And we need to move quickly." I nodded. "I'm ready." After we finished signing the papers and making the necessary arrangements, I left John's office with a new sense of purpose. The weight of the decision to divorce Sarah was heavy, but it felt necessary, almost liberating. The next step was bringing Victor down, and I wasn't going to stop until I saw it through. I wasn't going to let them get away with it, not when I had the power to expose everything. As I walked down the street, I realized that my life had just split into two halves, before and after. Before, I had everything I thought I wanted: the job, the wife, the success. After, I had nothing but a purpose, and that was enough for me. It was time to make sure they paid for what they had done. And this time, I wasn't going to lose. The next few days felt like I was living in a parallel universe, where everything was happening to someone else, but the events were all too real to ignore. The divorce papers were filed, and the clock started ticking. I wasn't surprised when Sarah called again, but I couldn't bring myself to pick up. Her voice had become a distant echo, a reminder of the woman I thought I knew, the woman I had spent years building a life with, only to watch her shatter everything for a few moments of fleeting power. I couldn't forgive that. Not yet. Not in the way she wanted me to. She kept texting, asking me to talk, to meet, but I ignored it all. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I spent my days gathering every shred of evidence I could find on Victor. The meetings with John had become more frequent, and the investigation into Apex's financial records was moving forward faster than I expected. John had managed to get a few things into motion with the SEC, but I wasn't about to sit around waiting for them to catch up. I had to move now. The more I uncovered, the more I realized just how deep Victor's corruption ran. The acquisition reports, the inflated valuations, the shell companies, I had it all in front of me, and every piece was a key that would unlock his downfall. I had kept my head down at work, making sure no one suspected anything. Victor, of course, had no idea what was coming. He continued to send me texts, each one more patronizing than the last. "Jack, this isn't worth it. You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. Let's sit down, man. Talk this through like adults." I ignored every single one of them, deleting them without a second thought. They meant nothing now. He thought he could just erase the damage he had done with a few words, a smile, and $1. What he didn't know was that he had already sealed his fate. One afternoon, I was reviewing some more of the financials when my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Sarah or Victor. It was an email from the SEC. The subject line read, "SEC investigation, request for meeting." My heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. They had all the information they needed. They were ready to move. I quickly dialed John. "It's happening," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The SEC is ready. They want to meet with me." "Good," John replied, his tone calm but sharp. "This is the moment we've been preparing for. We need to be careful. If we do this right, we can take down Victor and Apex for good." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I'm ready. I've got everything we need." John didn't waste time. We scheduled the meeting with the SEC for the next morning. I spent the rest of the evening going over every piece of evidence, every report, and every email I had gathered. It was overwhelming, but I couldn't afford to miss anything. I had to make sure they understood the full scope of the fraud Victor had orchestrated. The hours slipped by as I prepared for the most important meeting of my life. The next morning, I walked into the SEC office, feeling more confident than I ever had before. I had already lost everything, but now, in this moment, I was taking control. I wasn't going to be the man they thought they could break. I was going to be the man who brought them all down. I sat down across from 2 SEC investigators and an FBI agent, and for the first time in days, I felt a sense of calm. The game had changed. It was no longer about revenge. It was about justice. And I was ready to make sure Victor Allen and everyone involved paid for their crimes. The meeting with the SEC was everything I had hoped for and more. The agents listened intently as I laid out the evidence. I had spreadsheets, bank records, emails, and the testimony of a whistleblower from one of the companies Victor had acquired. I had documented every fraudulent transaction, every shell company he had funneled money through, every shady deal that had been made. The details were meticulous. I watched the expressions of the investigators carefully as I presented the case, their eyes widening with each new revelation. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, the realization of how big this was. This wasn't just about Victor. This was about a network of corruption that reached into the very heart of Apex Technologies. When I finished, one of the SEC agents, a woman named Sarah Chen, leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "This is incredibly serious, Mr. Peterson," she said, her voice steady but filled with awe. "If what you're saying is accurate, we're looking at securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, multiple felonies. But we need to move carefully. Going after someone at Victor Allen's level won't be easy. They'll come after your credibility, your personal life. You understand that, right?" I nodded. I had known this from the moment I decided to go forward with it. This wasn't just about bringing down a corrupt CEO. It was about exposing an entire system that had been built on lies and deceit. And I was fully aware of the consequences. I had already lost everything that had once mattered to me: my wife, my job, my dignity. There was no going back now. I understand, I said, my voice calm, even though I felt a fire building inside me. But I'm not backing down. I have all the evidence, and I'm ready to take it as far as we need to. Sarah nodded, exchanging a glance with her colleague. We'll need to verify everything you've given us, of course, she said. It could take weeks, even months, but this is the kind of case that could bring down a whole network of criminal activity. She paused, looking at me directly. And we'll need you to stay completely neutral. No changes in behavior at your workplace, no indication that you've been involved in this investigation. If word gets out, it could jeopardize everything. I felt a brief moment of doubt flicker, but I pushed it aside. I had been careful up until now. I had played the game for years, hiding behind the success I had built at Apex, never once questioning the people I worked for. But now, there was no more playing. There was only the truth, and I was determined to see it through. I can do that, I said, my voice steady, unshakable. The agents exchanged another look, and Sarah smiled faintly. Good, because this is bigger than you think. But if what you've provided checks out, we'll be able to bring charges against Victor Allen, and it won't stop there. We're going to have to move fast. Move fast? What's the timeline? I asked, my mind racing. I needed to know how soon this would all happen, how soon I could make sure Victor paid for what he had done. She hesitated for a moment before answering. We don't have an exact timeline, but once we've verified the evidence, we'll move quickly. Victor won't see it coming. Neither will anyone else at Apex. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over me. The worst part was over. The hard part was done. Now all I had to do was wait and watch as everything I had fought for came to fruition. The people who had tried to destroy me, who had thought they could humiliate me into submission, would soon be facing the consequences of their actions. And I wasn't going to stop until they did. The next few weeks were a blur of waiting, strategizing, and pretending. I returned to work at Apex, hiding behind a mask of normalcy, doing my best to avoid Victor, to avoid Sarah, and to avoid drawing attention to myself. Every day felt like I was walking on a tightrope, knowing that one wrong move could set everything back. But at the same time, I felt an odd sense of control, like I was playing a game now, a game I knew I could win. I kept my head down, did my job, and didn't engage in any of the corporate banter that used to come so naturally. I wasn't here to make friends anymore. I was here to make sure Victor Allen paid for what he had done. The SEC had been working in the background, following the trail I had laid out for them. I hadn't heard much, but I didn't need to. I had already given them everything they needed, and I trusted that they were moving forward with the investigation. I could almost feel it happening, like the slow, inevitable rise of a tide before it crashes onto the shore. I just had to hold on a little longer. Then one morning, the email came. The subject line was simple: SEC investigation, next steps. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it, reading quickly through the lines of text. The SEC had confirmed they were ready to move forward with their case against Victor. They had verified the evidence, they had cross-checked everything, and they were preparing to bring the full weight of federal charges against him. It was happening. The wheels were in motion, and I was finally going to get justice. But with that realization came a new wave of fear. The closer we got to the final confrontation, the more I worried about what would happen next. What if I was dragged down with Victor? What if I couldn't protect myself from the fallout? The FBI had warned me. Going after someone like Victor, someone with his resources and influence, could mean that I'd become a target. But there was no turning back now. I had already crossed this line, and I wasn't going to let fear stop me from finishing what I started. I spent the next few days preparing myself for what was coming. I made sure my own affairs were in order, secured the evidence I had, made sure my lawyer had everything he needed, and finalized the details of my personal life that had been put on hold for too long. As much as I tried to ignore the fear, it was still there, lurking just beneath the surface. I knew that when this all came crashing down, it wouldn't just be Victor and Apex that were affected. It would be me too. I met with John to go over the details. "We're almost there," he said, his tone serious but reassuring. "The SEC's moving fast now, and the FBI's got their eye on Victor. It's a matter of days, not weeks. You're gonna be all right." But I wasn't so sure. The closer we got to the end, the more real the risks felt. I could lose everything again: my career, my reputation, my freedom. But as I sat across from John, I realized that all I had ever truly cared about was protecting the truth. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about making sure that someone like Victor could never hurt anyone again. The final decision was out of my hands. I had done everything I could to set the stage. Now, all I had to do was wait for the world to catch up with the truth. And in that waiting, I found a strange kind of peace. No matter what happened next, I had reclaimed my power, and I wasn't going to lose it again. The moment I'd been waiting for finally arrived. It wasn't a dramatic event, no loud sirens or a dramatic confrontation. It was more like the quiet stillness before a storm, where everything feels poised for a shift and you can sense the tension in the air. The email from John came early one morning. "It's happening today. Victor is getting arrested." It was simple, straightforward, and it hit me harder than I expected. The reality of it all started to sink in. This was it. The man who had tried to ruin my life, the man who had manipulated and embezzled from the very company I had devoted myself to, was going to face the consequences. And I had been the one to put the final nail in his coffin. I didn't feel the triumphant rush I thought I would. Instead, I felt something else. Relief, yes, but also a sense of emptiness. The last few months had been a whirlwind of emotions, from the shock of betrayal to the quiet determination to right the wrongs. But now that it was all coming to a head, I realized that this wasn't going to magically make everything better. Nothing was going to bring back the years of my life that had been wasted, the trust that had been broken, or the part of myself I'd lost in the process. The real cost of everything was still unfolding, and it would take more than just Victor's arrest to undo the damage. But in that moment, as I read John's message, I knew one thing for sure. I had won. The system had been rigged in Victor's favor for so long, and I had been just one of the countless people crushed under it. But now, the tables had turned. The FBI had been at his house early that morning, and the media was already picking up the story. The charges against him were severe: embezzlement, wire fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy. It was enough to put him away for years, maybe decades. The news would spread fast. His life as he knew it was over. I couldn't help but feel a small measure of satisfaction. As much as I had wanted to see him brought to justice, I also realized something important. What Victor had done to me, to Sarah, to the company, it wasn't just about the money. It was about power. He had used people, manipulated them, and treated them like pawns in a game he was playing for his own gain. But in the end, his arrogance had caught up with him. He had underestimated me, and now it was over. I sat back in my chair and stared out the window, watching the city wake up. The streets were bustling with people on their way to work, cars honking, the usual rhythm of a busy day. But for me, everything felt different. I was free in a way. I wasn't the same person I had been before this all began. I had lost so much, but I had also gained something more valuable: my integrity, my sense of self. The weight that had hung over me for so long was finally starting to lift. The phone buzzed again. It was Sarah, her name flashing across the screen. I hesitated, but only for a moment. I had no desire to speak to her. Not now, not ever again. The person who had walked into that conference room with me was gone. The woman who sat on Victor's lap had chosen her side. So I did the only thing I could do. I deleted her message without even reading it. I had rebuilt my life on my terms, not on anyone else's. I had fought for the truth, and in the end, it had set me free. And as I sat there, the world outside bustling with life, I knew that I was finally, truly at peace. I had done what needed to be done. The rest of it, my past, the betrayal, the pain, was behind me now. I had my future, and this time, it was mine to shape. In life, never underestimate the power of integrity and self-worth. When faced with betrayal or adversity, it's easy to succumb to anger and revenge. But the true strength lies in standing your ground with honor. Build your life on truth, not on appearances or the expectations of others. Protect your dignity, and when it's tested, rise above. People may try to break you, but how you respond defines you. Take control of your story, no matter how messy it gets. The journey may be hard, but staying true to yourself will always lead you to freedom and peace.